I'm glad to see so many familiar faces here and some new folks. Just to get started, can I get a sense, how many people have never been to this play before? We got 2, awesome. We got 3, I love it. Welcome, we're glad to have you here. For all of our familiar friends, we're so glad to have you back. My name is Connor Zora, I'm our creative director here, in charge of our gallery shows and special events. And we're really, really excited today to present a solo exhibition by Nicole Ponce, our current studio manager. Nicole joined us just over a year ago and has really, really transformed the way that this play operates as studio manager. She has taken things under control, sort of reined in the beast that is our studio, and has gotten things into a spick and span shape. So I'm really grateful to have Nicole as both a coworker, but also as a fellow artist at the studio. I'm sure you've all seen Nicole's really beautiful sculptures. She makes really lovely hand-built work that's inspired by the ocean and has these really interesting forms. So today we're really, really excited to present Nicole's solo show of her work. And without further ado, I'll let Nicole talk a bit about her pieces. Thank you.
Get my handy-dandy notes. Also, thank you, Connor, for that really amazing introduction. I was not expecting that. So I'm Nicole. Thank you all for coming here. I'm so happy to see as many people that decided to come today.
Yeah.
So the piece that, or the work that we're discussing today is the Into the Abyss. So this is my very first solo show ever, where I was and I am so pumped about it. So thank you all for sharing this experience with me today. So if you want to, the next slide. I moved here to DC from New Mexico back in 2022. And it's been like a really interesting change from the desert to this place that has so much water. Like, I don't know what you guys do with all this water. It's crazy. But this is one of the mountain ranges in Albuquerque that face the east, and it was always really beautiful. So like I said, I was born and raised from there. I graduated from UNM with my bachelor's degree in psychology. And at some point in time, I was wanting to go to grad school. So I was looking at different grad school programs, and in order to get into these programs, I found out that I didn't have enough art studio credits in order to apply, because I wanted to become an art therapist and counselor. So I then started my journey at the Central New Mexico Community College, where I started taking courses to get those art credits going. So in the fall of 2019, I took a course called Portfolio Development. So that was a class that was geared towards building an art career and developing a portfolio. So one of the projects that was required of that class was creating a body of work, which is sort of what these ones are based off of. So I, in a Ceramics 2 course, had a bunch of scrap slabs of clay and created this little guy here. And there was something really interesting that I loved about the way that the clay kind of laid into this piece, and it became alive in some way. So I was thinking like, all right, well maybe I'll make a bigger one. So this is one that I made based off of this little guy, which this was the one that really inspired all of these pieces, just because of like how unique this sort of turned out. All right, so then for this work, I decided to choose 6 geometric shapes in order to base like each sculpture off of. So in the gallery now, starting from like the left side going to the right, it's the order in which I built them. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the shapes are oval, circle, square, triangle, pentagon, and circle. And then these are all of the animals that I sort of loosely base the sculptures off of as well. I chose these animals because they had corresponding characteristics with like the general like geometric shape. So that's why I selected these ones. And from there, there were a lot of local ceramic artists in New Mexico that I drew inspiration from some of these sculptures here. So I was inspired by like little bits and pieces from each artist. So these are just people I wanted to acknowledge to let them know that they inspired me in some way. And then these are just like some small work in progress photos from when I started. So just to get an idea, all of the sculptures that I made are built from slab. And I usually start off with like a paper template. So this one, for instance, is the paper template that I chose for the angler sculpture, which, what did I name that one? I was like, anyway, so this is like, I chose really so basically the names that I chose for the pieces were, I looked up the animals that were similar. So let's, for instance, like the anglerfish. I chose scientific names, and then I just chose the ones that seemed like most artistic and interesting. And that's what they are, so whatever they are is whatever I decided. So anyways, this guy. So I did 2 slabs, which you can see here. Like these are the paper templates that I started, and then I put it together. So all of them did roughly start as like these rough or like rigid, like 3-dimensional polygons, and then they were manipulated into shape. And then just some more process photos. And what I really like about clay in general is that element of discovery that you can get from like working and manipulating the clay, where you just like make these different gestures and then something just sort of like emerges. There were a lot of aspects of these pieces that were like happy accidents, I suppose. Like I didn't intend them to be that way, but I think they were sort of like meant to be that way in the end. Like the clay was like guiding me in some way, and almost as if like the spirit of these creatures were also there, like guiding my movements. So beautiful. So do we have any questions? Oh, hands everywhere. I'll go count.
I would love, Nicole, to hear more about your process for how the interior is.
Yes! Okay.
Trade secret. Yeah. How do you
It is witchcraft. That's what I was gonna say, but like it's magic. It's not. It's just clay. So I knew you were gonna ask that question, so I brought this like little paper template. So after I created each shape, I roughly measured like the length of the interior and the height. So that way it almost looked like very seamless, like you couldn't really see the back. But basically each one of those interior pieces is just a very thin slab of clay that started out like this, and then I pinched and pulled the edges of it and kind of made it wavy, and then stuck them all together on the inside.
Without messing it up, like without messing the rest of them up.
So you have, like, I would start from one end and then fill them in throughout.
Do you use like a tool to help like compress where you join the tiny slabs to the existing stuff? Because it doesn't seem like there's like a lot of space, and they're so thin and delicate and beautiful, and so it's like, yeah, sorcery.
So I just like use my tongue. So yeah, tools are very important. I have plenty of tools that are necessary to like achieve these kind of techniques. But yeah, so you'd start from one end, I'd blend it, and then continue and add in another and another and another until it goes all the way around, depending on like which one it is. But yeah, start on one end and then fill them in. Yeah.
How do they not
Great, that's great, fine.
So
Beyond magic, right?
So I intentionally like set them inward inside of the sculpture. So if you get a little bit closer, none of those kind of like delicate baleen-like sculptures are extending past the sculpture. They're kind of like inset. Because that was one big concern that I had, is if they were to get nicked, like they would definitely break.
Yeah.
So that was also very intentional of like trying to keep them somewhat safe by embedding them a little bit inside the sculpture.
But how did they not break when you were putting them in?
Magic. I mean, it has everything to do with like the consistency of the clay and just making sure that it was right throughout each step. So I think that's just skill.
The pieces shared similar techniques, but I'm curious if there were any techniques that you, as you were making these, that you introduced along the way, or you said, oh, I'm gonna take that and, you know, go down that. Was there anything that came up during the process that you had started with initially as an idea?
I think that would have to do with like the surface decoration. So all of them from the beginning share the like little rounded beads and that kind of like cord on the interior of like their mouths. And so yeah, I think like in terms of texture and patterning, those I think were kind of influenced by the others, because they're like specifically with this like the orange kind of like angler sculpture, they're almost like little starbursts or like flowers that kind of align on this chain. And I really loved that, so like I kind of took essence of that, and then with the round one, the like puffer, at least I know the name of that one, it's Diadon, because I was like, that's cool. But there are also these kind of like starburst like patterns, so I think so as you may notice, some of them do have like feet that are similar, but yeah, I think it varies. So yeah, I'd say mostly in the texture is like where that kind of came out.
When you started, did you have a fully developed vision of how you wanted it to look, or did you let the clay guide you where you ended up?
It definitely organically developed as it went, because starting with the first one, the one that was based off of an oval, it was like an oval cylinder that kind of became what it is. So it's like I didn't intend it to look that, like none of these, I'm trying to think. I don't think any of them turned out exactly how I envisioned them. They all sort of became their own thing as I worked on the clay. Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh.
So in looking at the work, you have some pieces that are from before your time in DC, and you have some pieces that are from after your time in DC. When I look at these, I feel a real desert sensibility to the work. It could be the quality of the clay. But I'm curious, does your move to the East Coast change the way that you view any of these pieces, or that you think about the art that you're making?
I think so, because I was just having this discussion with Maria, since I did grow up in the desert and like moving to this side of the country, thinking about, I want to say these are almost like a fantasy or like an homage to the ocean, of this body of water, this like different kind of environment that I never had access to, or like little access to. And thinking about DC influencing it specifically, I think, yeah, mainly like regionally, possibly, because it's like there's so much access to resources here. Like I can't, every time my partner and I are driving around, I'm just like, oh my God, look at all the water you guys have. It's just like water here and water there, and it's blue. So anyways, I think yes, to actually pinpoint and like know what that is, hard to say, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
You've got this through line, even in the title of the talk, like the depths and the abyss, and I'm curious, what do you see as the thematic connection between that imaginative space and making these forms that are sort of living shapes within them?
I don't know. I'd have to really think about that. I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question. Yeah. Let's talk about that later. I'd love to have more feedback the way I'm like, I don't know. Yes.
This is amazing. It really is moving in many ways. What is your next project?
Well, I'm thinking about making more clay instruments. I kind of have this idea of making a round coiled-like didgeridoo. So I want to explore the idea of making clay instruments, maybe like drums in some way. I make a lot of rattles and whistles, for those of you that do know, and for those of you that don't know, I make a lot of a lot of musical instruments. So I think that's kind of the next thing that I want to do, is explore like the musical qualities that clay can provide.
Well, I think that's a wonderful place to leave it off on. Everybody, thank you so much. We're gonna hang out for a bit. So before we go, before she runs away, I want to thank Sue Decker for all of her wonderful. Thank you all for coming out. We're going to hang out for a bit, so feel free to grab some more snacks, talk to Nicole, and let's party.